almost done with my first season for this year, 2020, but something very interesting just came up in the headlines today. Today being Tuesday, May 5th, 2020, Cinco de Mayo. This article was all about the dynamics that we've been discussing over this series of Trinity's Emerald Triangle. As you can tell from the date of production, we are in the throes of COVID right now, and almost everything is shut down, even the weed industry. However, as you all know, lots of industrious people are trying their damnedest to open up the economy to keep us from being sucked into the financial black hole, including my fellow comrades in cannabis. The story made national headlines this morning. Suspect drops nearly $1 million on road during police chase in California. Many of you may have already heard about it, but for the rest of you living on the moon, I'll reiterate it. It involved three guys, Frank Caprero and Desmond McDay, both of Medford, New York. The third guy, at the time of this production, is still unknown because he got away. I assume these three boys were traveling in a convoy because when the cop tried to pull Caprero over, the unknown driver acted as a decoy and straddled the line with his SUV, trying to block the cop from going after Caprero. Caprero took off but pulled over and quickly dropped two large cardboard boxes on the side of the road and then raced on. Finally, the cop was able to gun it around the decoy and came up behind Caprero, who then pulled over and surrendered. The decoy took off in the other direction, making his getaway. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, a passing driver on the interstate who saw Caprero dump the boxes called it in. The cops soon made it to the scene minutes later and picked up the boxes, which happened to be full of blocks of cash totaling $915,000. Then, from what the news story said, the second guy, Desmond McDay, who was driving ahead of Caprero, was also apprehended. I would imagine that with this amount of money, it could have been 2 or 3 crews from New York that had pulled their money together and sent those boys out to pick up product. Or it could have also just been one big-ass kingpin who sent them out. Who knows? Will we ever find out? Well, this is just a damn shame for those boys, for the growers, the New York distribution crews, and ultimately the users. You just gotta hate it when the cops get the money. It would have been good if at least the growers could have got the money, but not the cops. Here are a few of the comments I pulled off of Fox News today. Colas said, the cops in California must have been on a camera. In Florida, the money would disappear. The nearby Bal Harbour police took millions from drug dealers and never made an arrest. The Fort Lauderdale cops recently can account for $100,000 in drug money. Mayor Pash replied, actually, he dropped $2 million, but the police were only able to find $1 million. She got 38 likes for that one. Banna Corin replied, no one can tell me that it doesn't happen. I'm with you there, Banna Corin, or however you say your name. Carson says, his doghouse will now have a built-in pool. He's referring to the drug-sniffing dog Benny, who they used at the scene. Blutoreski1 said, about 10 years ago, I was jogging and found a plastic bag next to a bike trail with $9,200 in it. I turned it in, and the cop looked at me like I was out of my mind. Fiorellini replied, you put that cop between a rock and a hard place. None One also weighed in and decided that Pluto Blutoreski was out of his mind for turning in the money. I think I gotta agree with that guy. My friend Nick Franchi off of Facebook said, sure, the box contained an off amount of $915,000, $15,000. Most likely an even mill, with the rest going to some officers' large pockets. And I replied, I know, right? The comments went on, but those were just a few of them. How about let's review most of the things that we've discussed this first season using this story in the headlines and my own story as well. Now, pay attention, kids, because there's going to be a test at the end. These guys were each respectively driving 3 brand new SUVs. A Chevrolet Suburban, the one that Caprero was driving, a Ford Expedition, the one that McDay was driving, and a Chevrolet Tahoe, the SUV that got away. Okay, I'll tell you right now, I do not think this was an inside job. No, sir, I don't. And I'll tell you why. Let's talk about some mistakes that they may have committed out on this run. The first mistake is that they got the cops' attention. They drew too much attention to themselves, obviously. All right, let's go through the steps of the crime scene. They were caught near Merced County on Interstate 5, that's in Central Valley, driving north. They outright admitted to the cops they were on their way up to NorCal. I don't know this, but it seems pretty obvious. I'm almost positive they were driving rental cars because what are the odds that 3 young guys would just happen to each own a big old black SUV? So, renting, obviously. All 3 SUVs were black. Renting an SUV to haul weed is good, right? I totally did that too, all the time. Why? Remember when we talked about cops tagging plates all along the freeways and interstates? If we were driving the same car across the nation's largest drug corridor, Interstate 80, from Utah to California, week after week, going back and forth, the cops doing the tagging would get familiar and then suspicious with our car. Eventually, they'd probably get nosy and come do a check by pulling Bob and me over for some bogus traffic citation, speeding 2 miles over the speed limit, or following too closely, just to check us out and ask us where we were going and why. And they would try to act all cool and casual to satisfy their curiosity. And if the story checked out and passed the smell test and their profile of us was trustworthy, they would have let us go on our way and left us alone in the future. But we didn't even want to go there, of being pulled over even once. So we just rented a different car for every run, which there were many. So, how are the cops doing the tagging exactly? Along with the logistical programs of tagging, they also add another secret program to the mix called Stingray. Remember we talked about Stingray. Stingray is a stealth technology that very few people know about. It's also a suitcase-sized machine that simulates a cell tower to trick travelers' phones into pinging in. After your cell phone pings to Stingray, the technology is able to capture all the phone's information so that cops can then listen in on your conversations, read texts, emails, notes, and browse through the phone. Once the phone is captured on Stingray, the cops have complete access to everything on the phone. I want to stress this. I can't stress it enough. Cops are using Stingray on everyone, everywhere. If you're in the range of Stingray's net, especially out on drug corridors like I-80 and I-5, your phone is being surveilled. No exceptions. You may think, well, I'm not committing any crime, so they're not going to find anything. I don't care. Really? It's no crime to send your husband or boyfriend provocative, intimate photos of yourself, is it? It ain't no crime to text your mom that you're tested positive for COVID or AIDS or STD or anything else. Doubt if you'd be texting your mom about that, but somebody. But those bored cops eating Cheetos out on the interstate who are tagging plates and surveilling might get a really big kick out of seeing all that. Hell, maybe they'll download a few of those really lovely photos of your girlfriend you have on your phone or other cute girls' phones in any given car. You know, pass those photos around like trading cards amongst themselves. Every single article on these three boys gave Benny, the weed-sniffing German shepherd, all the credit for helping with the bust. But you can be sure the authorities weren't making a peep about how their $500,000 fake cell tower could have had anything to do with the actual bust. One word out of their loose lips and they would lose their federal funding for the Stingray technology. And hey, don't worry your little head about those cops taking away your constitutional protection. Constitutional rights for citizens went out of style decades ago. Hell, prosecutors rarely, if ever, even tell the judges or the defendants in prosecuting cases how Stingray was involved in their drug conviction. Seriously, if you don't believe me, go look it up online. See for yourself what the ACLU and others have to say about the massive abuses of Stingray technology. But our captured cannabis warriors were smart though and didn't use cell phones. We know that because the authorities confiscated 2 walkie-talkies after the bust. Okay, those walkie-talkies were a smart move to be sure. But let's examine more plate tagging dynamics. First of all, let's pray those boys weren't even carrying turned off personal cell phones around with them because Stingray could still garner useful information from those kind of phones too, like meetups and such. What if you were a cop and noticed in the incoming data suddenly 3 brand spanking new black SUVs, which in itself is very conspicuous, showed up on your radar? On top of that, these vehicles weren't from your neck of the woods. All of them were from New York? The plot thickens. Heck, maybe the 3 SUVs were even owned by the same rental company or person and traveling within a mile or so apart from each other? Tagging technology tells cops who the cars are registered to. They know if the car is a rental and which rental company the car is registered to. Hear any alarm bells going off, officer? How smart does a cop have to be to think, wow, this seems like more than a coincidence? Adding more to the coincidences are these 3 practically identical triplet SUVs were in California going in the exact same direction, heading north to Mecca. You know, Mecca, the Emerald Triangle? During a time where only big trucks are out on the freeways during COVID. Yeah, that's some serious exposure there, boys. Let's go down the rabbit hole even deeper. 3 young boys were each driving SUVs. Ding, 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 ding. I'm going to assume that at least one of them was an Anglo because of his Italian surname, Capraro. But if the other one who made the getaway or the second captured driver, Desmond McDay, was black, well, there's another problem because while I'm not a racist, most state patrol officers are. Remember we talked about dressing like a hippie or DWB when you're carrying money or drugs? DWB? Driving while black or brown? Believe me, profiling is alive and well out on the freeways and interstates of white America. Somewhere along the trip from New York to California, this little convoy's plates may have been burned. I'm figuring it was probably in California because every other state would have wanted to keep the glory and the money for themselves too. They just didn't catch it. How was it that California authorities were able to capture our boys, whereas no other state patrols in any other state noticed as these 3 shiny black SUVs whizzed across state lines like they were in a freaking Macy's Thanksgiving parade? Maybe it wasn't plate tagging that burned them. Which reminds me of some very conspicuous drivers I once saw out on the road when Bob and I stopped for the night in Blue Lake Casino up near Arcata. For those of you who don't know, Arcata is smack in the middle of the Emerald Triangle. As Bob was checking in at the front desk, a shiny black Cadillac Escalade with spinners on the tires rolled up. Yep, you heard me right. Like Chris Rock likes to say, they were spinning! Oh, and it gets better. This huge, bigly black dude wearing 4 gold chains unfolded out of the driver's seat. Then the front passenger door opened, and the first thing I noticed were 2 6-inch acrylic high heels swinging out of that Cadillac. Then came the bare legs up to the yin-yang, and the next thing I noticed were the boobs. Big boobs. And then the blonde hair. Russian hoe blonde. You know the tone, the color. Talk about a bad cliche. Need I say more? Okay, I'll say more. I said to myself, Self, who does that? Who advertises their brokering and buying weed? Not to be judgmental or anything, but no sir, that just is plain foolishness. Hey Snoop Dummyo, why not just wear a gold tag on one of those damn chains of yours that says, guilty as charged? The very most important rule of thumb in driving contraband for Bob and me was, keep your damn head down. I mean, really, how hard can it be to just do the basics? Well, obviously for some, it's a real challenge. Sometimes I think this war on drugs is like living in the Wild West, to be sure. Remember when we talked about bounties? Good old-fashioned Wild West bounties. State patrols, particularly in Nevada and California, along with their DEA brothers, offer $500 cash bounties to many gas station attendants and hotel clerks for any suspicious characters they call in, that then get later convicted. Cops give these people direct cell phone numbers to call. Did our 3 boys park those conspicuous New York license plates right out there in front of the window to keep their eye on the cash as they stop for a quick bite to eat at the mega convenience store? Did one of them pay for gas for all 3 cars at the same counter at the same time? Better yet, maybe they drove down Main Street in Buttonwillow, California and stopped for gas and coffee at the Starbucks in front of God and everyone. You've got to admit that was pretty brave and ballsy of those young'uns driving across deserted interstates and freeways in a convoy on the search for cannabis. The minefield of driving weed is complex and very, very dangerous. Too dangerous to afford the luxury of being arrogant and naive. The 2 boys they captured were listed as 23 and 25 years old, not nearly old enough or seasoned enough to evade the hardened steel traps of overweight sociopath troopers who've been running this cat and mouse game on the war on drugs for the past 40 years. For those of you kids who've been listening to the series of Trinity's Emerald Triangle, I'm now going to give you a test like I said I would at the beginning of this episode. Get your pencils out. First question. Who do you know that drives convoys of black shiny SUVs? If you listed A, funeral processions, or B, gangs of feds on their way up the mountain in NorCal to burn down crops and bust weed farmers, you are correct. Give yourself 10 points. Second question. Check yes or no. Do you think those boys going out to NorCal in 3 shiny black SUVs might have been a bad omen? If you checked yes, give yourself 10 more points for the correct answer. Third and last question. What's my mantra I always say at the end of every show? Don't do it. Just don't do it. Remember? Don't do anything I would do. And I'll tell you, those boys surely did do plenty of things I would not have done. But still, we all ended up in the same place, now didn't we, Trinity Lou? It's not like I did it any better. My heart aches for those boys, it really does. I don't know them, but I still love them and appreciate what they were trying to do, and many of you do too. I wish them the best of luck in their new lives as freshly minted inmates and felons. As for the rest of you saints and sinners, be safe. Take care during this COVID quarantine, and if you haven't listened yet to the first season, go and do that right now. Be sure to subscribe, like, notifications, and all the things you're supposed to do on social media to help me out. Until then, don't do anything I would do, and I will see you next January, kids, for the second season of Trinity's